Don't miss this week's Mutual UFO Network's UFO Conference at the Erie, PA Bayfront Convention Center. The conference features Stanton Friedman, John Bentry, Karen Dolan, Stan Gordon, and Reverend Swope. Visit MUFONPA.com for details. Visit the PA Mutual UFO Network for more details.
Hi, this is Dave Roundtree, author of Paranormal Technology, Understanding the Science of Ghost Hunting, lecturer, author, and paranormal researcher. And when you're not busy in the field, do what I do and listen to the Malliard Report with Jim Malliard.
The opinions expressed on the Malliard Report are those of the host and participants and are not intended to and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any simulcasting radio network or sponsor. All listeners are advised to make their own decisions.
It's the Malliard Report, yeah, the Malliard Report, the paranormal talk radio show with Jim Malliard as your host. See what lies beneath any paranormal activity. Go inside a world that others don't want to see. It's the Malliard Report, yeah, the Malliard Report.
Hello, everybody. How are we doing tonight? I hope everybody's doing well. I'm glad to be back live this week. Last week, my son got a nosebleed, so I had to take him to the ER to have his nose cauterized, so that was kind of a misevent, so to speak, but we're back. Everybody's better than ever, so here we go. My guest tonight is Jim DeFelice. I'm just going to say author, because I've been looking at all the different book titles here, and I'm just amazed.
Sometimes I'm amazed too, Jim. Hello, and thanks a lot for having me on your show.
Well, thanks a lot for coming on. I'm surprised you were... Do you still write them out longhand, or do you just use the computer now?
You know, it's funny. I've actually always written in computer, but a year ago, actually about 18 months ago now, I tried writing a book longhand, and occasionally I've written little snatches longhand when I've been stuck. Just a little something to get out of the rut. Well, I started working on one of the books, and by gosh, I thought I was doing great, and I just kept going. Unfortunately, I ended up with this huge, long, high pile of yellow paper, written on one side, and I had to put it into the computer at some point, and that was probably getting it from the yellow pad into the computer was probably the longest 2 or 3 months of my life.
Yeah, it sounds like my show notes. I started out with, I have legal pads too, and I had a whole bunch of show notes done for you, and then I started reading them, and I'm like, that's going to get too confusing, so I condensed them down, and now I have like a half a page of different.
Oh, that's good. Could you? But the real question is, could you read your handwriting? And that was my problem, and that.
Can I read my handwriting? Yes. If I had to call somebody in the room to host the show right now and just give them my notes, not a chance.
Well, I had trouble reading mine, so you're a step ahead of me.
So I want to start with Omar Bradley, because when I first looked you up, I wanted to talk to you about leadership. And
sure.
Last 5-star general. I mean, I guess I don't know that much about military history. So fill me in a little bit here. How did he
Bradley, Bradley's a really interesting character, but unfortunately, even though he's had an incredible amount of achievements, he's not really that well known to people. He's been kind of passed over for a number of different reasons. And I first got interested in Bradley because I had written a book on the American Army Rangers and their first battle in World War II. The book, which was published a couple of years ago, is called Rangers at Dieppe, and that's where their first battle was at Dieppe, France. And for most of the people involved in that battle, it was a total disaster. It's remembered in Canadian history as one of the great tragedies of World War II. But for the American Army Rangers, it was a baptism in fire, and they actually did very well and achieved their objective. Unfortunately, they also took, they did take losses but overall it was quite an achievement for them. In any event, I had worked on the book, and along the way in doing the research, I was very fortunate to make the acquaintance of some surviving Rangers. Unfortunately, the two men who were alive at the time when I started, who had been on the invasion, who were alive at the time when I started working on the book, their health was in very bad condition. But through them and through some other people, I was able to meet some other Rangers from that 1st Battalion. And I was very privileged to be able to, to talk to them and kind of keep up a correspondence and, occasionally talk to them on the phone. And after the book came out, after Dieppe came out, and I was looking around for another, some other World War II history topic to work on, I happened to be talking to one of the Rangers that day, and he told me a interesting and somewhat funny and off-color story about having to pull guard duty in Africa. And he started talking about General Bradley. That was one of the people one of the generals that they had to guard at an important meeting that they had. And I realized in talking to him, I really didn't know that much about Omar Bradley. I'd read his memoir maybe 10 years before, or quite a long time before, but I realized that I really didn't know all that much about him. And so I did, probably as most of your listeners do, and I'm sure as you do, I wanted to find out a little bit more about him. So the first thing I did was go to the local library here, and thinking, well, let me grab a Omar Bradley biography. And lo and behold, there was no biography of Omar Bradley. No one had ever written a biography of Omar Bradley, and I thought that that was an injustice to an important general, and I also thought it would be a great book to do, and that's kind of what got me on the road to studying Omar Bradley and eventually writing that book.
Yeah, it seemed like, because everybody knows Patton.
Everybody knows Patton. The interesting thing about Bradley is that he served. Not only did he serve under Patton in Africa and then in Sicily, but he also became Patton's boss. And the chemistry between those two generals, I think, was absolutely essential to the American victory in Europe from D-Day on. They had a very interesting relationship. At times, they were at odds with each other, and at other times they were so close that their staffs started calling them the Georgie and Omar show. They got along famously, pretty much. They got along very well from about the time that Patton comes to France after the American breakout, all the way through the end of the war. And the chemistry between those two, very, very high achieving generals, I guess is about the best way to put it. And Bradley was kind of kind of an easygoing, soft-spoken man, or at least as soft-spoken as a five-star general can be. And Patton, who's mercurial and everything that I guess we know or we think of, it's just amazing the way that they were able to work together. For some reason, Bradley was able to get the best out of Patton, and Patton was able to work with Bradley in a way that he had not been able to work with any of the commanders that he had been directly under in either in Africa really or in Sicily, where he was working with the British.
Yeah, that's why when I first heard Bradley, I went looking, digging for him, because I'm like, never. I mean, the name never crossed my mind, even in whatever 10th grade history. You hear the great heroics of Patton and all that fun stuff, and then I'm like, wait, Patton was told what to do by who? What? Wait, whoa.
Well, to some extent, I don't know. Even I'm not sure even Bradley could always tell Patton what to do, but they did pretty much get along. But you know what? The funny thing about Bradley is, and really, he's kind of a throwback in a lot of ways. He really would have preferred that. He had absolutely no problem letting not only Patton but the other generals who worked for him take the credit. He liked he liked just to do his job and to let other people shine, and that was really his whole style all through, not only through World War II, but earlier in his career, and then later on. After the war, he plays an extremely important role in reshaping the VA and doing a tremendous job for veterans. Now, what they don't teach us in history class is that the VA at the time of World War II was really an organization that needed a lot of work. It was not in very good shape. Bradley can't get too much credit for the job he did there. Now, there were a lot of people under him who did the nuts and bolts thing, but he had the stature and I guess to some extent the drive to kind of reshape a bureaucracy that just wasn't helping veterans and turn it into one that it really was a credit and really helped, I think in a lot of ways, helped America after the war become the America that we all value.
Just amazing to think about when you're just talking about that. Just the incredible man he must have been to be able to do all those different aspects of things, because some people don't transition well back from war.
Absolutely, and I think and that's a really good point. Now I would say that he probably he took the VA job reluctantly. He wanted to after the war in Europe was won, he wanted to go over to the Pacific, and he wanted to participate in the invasion of Japan, and requested that, and was in effect blocked from that by MacArthur. But the VA job was definitely a desk job, or at best a job where you went around giving speeches, and that's neither of those things were things that Bradley particularly liked, and yet he was able to roll up his sleeves and get involved and do an excellent job there.
Sounds like it. Just amazing to think about. So I guess I'm gonna have to go buy the book. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I think you've pretty much sold me, so at least you've sold one book tonight. So it was well worth your time so far. I've been thinking about it, and I figured sometimes you just got to hear the sales pitch on something, and then you go for it.
There you go. The great thing about Bradley, that while he was kind of a quiet leader, certainly compared to Patton in terms of how he led men, there was never any doubt about his personal courage. He had been quite an outdoorsman and very good shooter, very good hunter. And during the war in Africa and in Sicily, when he was actually a corps commander, he would the Americans at that point did not have anything close to air superiority, and the Germans would routinely attack not just the Americans, obviously, the British forces as well. The standard, I guess, kind of your standard modus operandi, if you're the general, is to be, as soon as the enemy aircraft appear anywhere, your aides will hustle you away and put you in the safest place. Well, Bradley didn't particularly like that. Bradley always traveled with his trusty Springfield rifle, and rather than going into the trenches that were dug on the front lines, he would grab his rifle from one of his aides and start shooting at the attacking German planes. And he did that quite a number of times. In fact, Bradley is tended to be very even-tempered, and the only time that I could find that he yelled at any of his aides, or at least that's recorded, was the one time when he called for his rifle and his rifle wasn't there, and he groused at having to go into the trench, and I'm afraid that the poor aide who did not have the rifle ready for him, probably his ears are still ringing, 50 years later.
That's quite remarkable. I would imagine being upset if my rifle wasn't ready. Okay, so I've got a question for one of my chat rooms here. I find this fascinating. So, did anyone try to block access to the records or anything?
No.
Slow you in your process?
No, that's actually a very good question. For the most part, there's an enormous amount, as you can imagine, there's an enormous amount of material available in two places. One is at West Point, which actually is, fortunately for me, relatively close to my home, and we were given full access to it. And the other depository of the records is in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. We got very good cooperation from the curators of the library and the collections. There were a few instances where material, believe it or not, had not yet been declassified, which is kind of odd to think of, but we went through the process, and they're primarily photos, and we eventually were, there's no secrets now, at least as far as that goes. The problem with Bradley is not so much getting access to the material. For historians have just traditionally, there's just so much material. A lot of historians have just not had the time, really, I guess, or maybe the inclination to kind of wade through it and to analyze it, which I have to say required an enormous amount of time. And the only reason that I was able to do it was that my wife worked as an unpaid, unpaid in money anyway, researcher for me, and she spent well over a year going through, kind of as the first set of eyes through a lot of that material anyway, and helping me process it and calling my attention to to different facets. There's also a lot of after action reports. There's also a lot of material that's been written about the different battles and accounts from Patton, accounts from Eisenhower, from Montgomery, from the other people who were there. So I think in this case, the biggest problem for anyone looking back at World War II is just simply dealing with the volumes and volumes of material, and then trying to kind of wade through the different interpretations that that people have had of that material, and that's actually quite a lot of work.
I'd imagine so. My guest tonight is Jim DeFelice here on the Malliard Report, best-selling author. Well, I guess I could say New York Times best-selling author.
Yeah, well, you can if you want. I've had, I think it was 10 or 11 books have been on the New York Times bestseller list, which it impresses people, in New York. I don't know really whether it should impress anyone anywhere, but that seems to ring a bell with people. So.
Well, tell me about the first time that you got. I guess you'd get a call or a letter from somebody. How did you find out the first time you were on the list?
The first time I was on the list was actually a book that I ghost wrote that I'm under a non-disclosure for. So, in that book, I was having some problems, and I was sort of called in to help work on, and I ended up doing a lot of I wrote about a third of the book, and in some ways, to be totally honest, actually in every way, when the book is on the list, I won't say it's a non-event, but you're already the way that book publishing works, generally you've written the book a year before, and in my case anyway, I tend to be kind of, on to the next thing, and it's great, it's fantastic, when somebody, calls to congratulate you or send you an email or points it out, and they're all excited, and I don't want to sound blasé, but you're like, oh, that's great, but I got to get this other book done. It's kind of funny. It's sometimes you don't really have a chance to step back and really appreciate it.
That's interesting. I guess, it does make sense because there's such a, that's where I'm headed next, actually, the gap between putting it together, writing it out, sending it off to be edited, and then printed, and then before it seems like it's got to grow be sold for a while before you even think about it. So you're probably almost into the next editing stage of the next book, I'd imagine.
Absolutely, you're absolutely you're thinking about the next book that you're doing, or or whatever other things you're doing, or as you were mentioning, I think at the top of the show about taking your son to the hospital. People sometimes forget that writers have actual other lives. So you're doing you're doing all these other things. They still make you take out the garbage. That's like, well, why? So
somebody's got to take all that yellow paper out.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta do something with it. But it's really I don't want to downplay it. I've been lucky in my throughout my career to have had a lot of support from people, but both editors and publishers, but most especially from readers, and the feedback that you get from people who have read books is just phenomenal. And that really, to me, getting an email from someone, from a reader, means a heck of a lot more. I'm not downplaying whatever sales numbers are, or whatever accolades, or whatever things that you get, but the simple email from somebody who enjoyed the book, or enjoyed the book and wants to point out something that you got wrong, or maybe wants to add something to the record, is just that really, to me, that's that's huge. It really makes your day. I know that's a cliche, but it really does. It really says, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. And it's really phenomenal. The most recent book that I've had on the bestseller list was American Sniper, which is the story of Chris Kyle, who was the most successful American sniper in history, and that book has been really a phenomenon. I think it's still actually on the New York Times list.
Yeah, the last time I looked, it was number 8.
Yeah, and
just for the record, so in case, and that covers all the print and all the hard books
and but what the most phenomenal thing about that book, when it first came out, Chris and I were I was fortunate enough to do a whole bunch of book signings with Chris, and as well as appearances. And the thing that really touched me, that really, really had an impact on me, and also on Chris, were just the people who came out at the book signings, and just their reaction to the work, and to Chris certainly, was just phenomenal. And whether the book had sold, I guess it sold a couple of million copies, but it's the one person, it's still, to me anyway, it's a one-to-one, a thing, a one-to-one transaction where, you've made an impact. It's phenomenal. Not only have you made an impact on that person, that you're shaking their hand, or, you're chatting with for a few minutes, but 4 or 5 years from now, someone reads the book, and maybe it influences them, in some small way, and and that's a really heady feeling. I mean, it's really, it's really intoxicating, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd make it all worth it, having that moment where going back a little bit, where somebody says good book. Because I know every time I hear good show, I see numbers of listeners, and it's like, there's so many millions of people on the earth that speak English, my numbers could be so much better. But hearing somebody that actually enjoyed the show makes it, that quells that fear for a few minutes that I could be doing better. So I agree.
Absolutely. Well, we can always do better. I mean, I think that, like yourself, I mean, that's one of the things that makes your show so good is that, you're always trying to make it better. And, sometimes people that are driven like that tend to, you lose sight, really. You start to focus on, I could have done this better, I could have done that better. And you lose sight, really, of the overall contribution that you're really making. And it's just phenomenal when people give you that kind of feedback.
Yeah. So back to Chris Kyle for a little bit. How was he as a person? Obviously, I never got to meet him or talk to him. So fill me in a little bit about him.
Well, Chris is a great guy. Unfortunately, Chris was murdered in February, and to be honest, I still really haven't processed that. But kind of pushing that aside, Chris was just kind of a regular, good old Texas boy, and he was a what you see is what you get kind of guy, and which I think is one of the things that I really admired about him. I'm not sure why someone from Texas, and Chris was definitely from Texas, and somebody from New York, and which is where I'm from and where my background is. I don't know why or how we got along so well, but we did. He's just a really easygoing guy to like and a natural guy to like. I wouldn't ever want to face him on the battlefield. I mean, he was very driven, and obviously very accomplished at what he did. But work aside, moving away from work, he's just kind of like a regular old Texan, just a good guy to hang out with, throw down a couple of beers, and do a barbecue with, or if you're into hunting or shooting. Well, there's really no better person to get some instruction on shooting from. But just in hanging out, he was great. Now I will say that he was so good at Madden football that playing with him, on the video game could be a little bit embarrassing. I think he beat me once, like 99-0 or something, and of course he was playing for the Dallas Cowboys, and I was playing for the New York Giants. So that was a little hard to take, but otherwise he was a great guy to be around.
Yeah, I've seen different clips of him being interviewed, trying to prepare for this portion. It just seems like an amazing guy and an amazing story. Obviously, because apparently you did pretty well writing it, because people were buying it like it's going out of style.
Well, that's nice. I fooled them all, I guess. But,
well, every once in a while you can do that, right?
The success of that book, I really have to turn the success of that book back on Chris, and also on his wife Taya, whose story I was able to get her story in the book, and I think that she really added a lot to the book. For me, American Sniper obviously is a lot about combat, and a lot about what SEALs go through, and a lot certainly about what war is. But at the heart of that book, for me, was their relationship, and how important family became for him. Because when you think about it, when you read the book, you come to find out that Chris, who loved his job, he loved being a SEAL, but he came to a point, his family came to a point where his family needed him more. They needed him home, and he really gave up. He gave up, a job that he loved, a profession that he loved, that he worked all his life for, to be with his family. And that's something that I'm not sure. I don't even know that I could do that. If you told me that my family needed me to stop writing, or and then become something else, I'm not sure I could make that sacrifice. So that was really kind of a fascinating element to Chris and to his family. And one of the reasons I think that the book has really touched so many people is because that's kind of the core of his story.
That is amazing to think about, because I mean that has to be so hard. And we were just talking about how Bradley transitioned out, so it's amazing to see the differences, but the similarities of how they were able to do it gracefully, I guess, for lack of a better, longer description.
Yeah, let's not. I think it was probably a little more graceful with Bradley. Chris, and we talk about it a little bit in the book. Chris did go through some difficult transitions. Going from war to peace is not an easy thing for anyone, and but he was able to try to keep it in perspective. And again, I think and I don't want to retell the entire book here, but I think that one of the things that really helped him through there was his family and was being close to them.
It's okay. We have half an hour left, so if you want to tell a whole story. My guest tonight's Jim DeFelice, author. Now, we've kind of been heavy to this point. Let's well, I'm not going to loosen it up because I know what your fiction's about. But how do you weigh out the two? I mean, it's got to be difficult. Is it difficult for you? It seems baffling to me to be going back and forth between fiction and nonfiction. But
it is a bit of a transition, and you do have to kind of shift your mind a bit. But in my case, I've been able to write, in so many different. They're generally somewhat related genres, but I've been able to write in so many kind of different areas and genres because, I jokingly say that it's because I really don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I just haven't made up my mind. But they also, I think that being able to, and really, it's kind of a privilege to be able to write books in so many different genres, and or at least in fiction and nonfiction, and still have people actually pay you to do that. And even better, actually, go to the bookstore or the library and get your book. That's enabled me to learn more things and to kind of explore different areas. Writing for me has always been, about finding things out, whether I'm finding things out about other people or finding things out about myself. That really, if you're not doing that as a writer, it becomes kind of a really, really boring, drab job, because there's a lot of times when writing really is, in order to get things done, you have to work on the computer. You have to lock yourself into a relatively small room and talk to yourself for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day. And if you're always telling yourself the same things or telling your computer the same things, I think it gets boring pretty quick.
Yeah, it does. Well, no, I'm just kidding. I don't do that either. But no, but it very well would. I mean, I'm assuming. I mean, if you do the same thing over and over again, kind of like an office job, day in and day out, reading the same stuff. So, do you prefer one over the other, fiction or nonfiction? No,
I don't. I think that everything is a little different, and I'm actually probably better known as a fiction writer, but I think that the nonfiction, there's a certain amount of, a certain kind of discipline that you have to bring to a nonfiction book, a certain amount of, it's not just research, because you certainly do a lot of research for fiction, but you have to be absolutely true to the core of the story, and by that I mean that you have to communicate the right facts of what the story was, but also you have to try to find the core of the story underneath those facts and somehow bring that out without employing any too many of the tricks that you'd use in fiction. If you're writing about Omar Bradley and you're writing it as nonfiction, you don't get to have him leading the final charge into Berlin. You have to follow what actually happened in the war, and you have to examine his failures as well as his victories. In fiction, there's you have to be more aware, I think, of you have to be more aware of some of the other themes that the larger themes that you're getting at, and the demand of the reader is that not only that you write those themes and entertain them with those themes, but you entertain them, with action, or if you're a thriller writer, which is primarily what I am. You have to get them excited on page one and keep that excitement level going and going and going, and you don't get to say, well, nothing happened for the next 20 years, because you say that, reader goes, okay, next book.
That is true. This popped up while we were talking about Chris Kyle, but I missed it because I wasn't paying attention. Have they talked about optioning that book into a movie, or any of your books in the movies?
That book, we're hoping will soon be a major motion picture. Bradley Cooper is going to play the lead, and it's a little bit premature to make any real announcements. There's a screenplay, which I'm not writing, but should be just about done, and there'll be a period of time when they kind of fiddle around with things and then start principal photography. Hopefully, they'll start filming it very soon. Hopefully.
So, by the time it's ready to come out on the big screen, you'll be ready to come back on. So, I hope.
Hopefully.
You said if I could put up with you for an hour. I don't know. Maybe it's the other way around. We got to figure this out before the end of the show.
You're doing fine. This is fun.
Here we go. Here's another one. How long does it from idea, the first idea until it's done editing and for sale? How long does that normally take you?
It's funny. It's hard to say because every book is different. For the nonfiction books, there's generally a lot of the research period is really long. American Sniper took us, I think it was, there's let's see, 4 or 5 really, really intense months where basically we were together enough to get into each other's hair, if we were going to get into each other's hair. But so that process can take a while. And yet, with some fiction books, they just seem to write themselves. Leopards Kill, which is a novel, and it's set in the U.S. and Afghanistan. And that book, for some reason, took. I think the writing of that book may literally have taken me only 2 months. I mean, it just, which is fast. It just kind of blew out. I mean, it just, started in the morning very early and just kind of racing through it, and then other books will literally take a year to physically write. Typically, a writer will write the novel, and it'll take anywhere from Leopards Kill is an exception, only a few months. And the writers will take as long as let's say a year. If you're working in kind of popular genres, you're expected really to come out with a book about every year or so, or roughly every year. Then again, a lot depends on the publisher, on what the publishers are expecting and what they want. But when you give the publisher, from the day that you give the publisher the book until the time it comes out, can be anywhere from 6 to 9 months to a year, sometimes a little tiny bit longer. In that time, the editor will start. The process kind of starts. The editor will give you some notes, maybe on things that there might be a little tweaks, or maybe a little improvements, or occasionally, now you have to totally rethink, this element of the plot or something, and so you'll have a couple of months to do that. The book will then go to to a copy editor, and will totally mangle it, and then you kind of fix it. Not just kidding. The copy editors.
They're great people. It's nothing personal.
I love copy editors, but So they'll try to fix your grammar for you, or not, depending on the copy editor and how cranky they are. And then there's a series of proofs, and where people look for mistakes or try to put other mistakes in, and then after that process is done, and the book will be physically printed and everything. So that overall process, as I say, takes, I'd say, probably on average about 9 months.
It just seems remarkable to me to be pushing back and forth about edits, and I don't know. I just like doing my live show and being done with it. I just can't imagine.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Well, believe me, there's a lot of times where you get to something and you say, you know what, I'm done with this, or at least for now. Of course, then when you take another break from it and you come back and you say, oh my goodness, how did I miss that, or why did I say that way, or if I had only done this again, or had more time to work on this. But that's the process. That's the way it is.
Yeah, that just baffles me. That's why I talk and you write. So let's. You mentioned you were a Giant. Well, you played as a Giants. Are you a Giants fan, or is that just the nature of being from New York?
Well, of course I'm a Giants fan, coming from New York. I'm also a New York Yankee fan. So
don't say of course. They have that other team up there.
What other team? No, I don't mind.
That sideshow, I think, is what we call them.
I do tend to take a lot of ribbing on my sports teams, but when you're a New York Yankee fan, the ribbon comes with the territory, and hey, we have all those rings. So what can I say?
Yeah, I was gonna say, as a Pirate fan. Oh, I just said that on. I got to delete that. Hold on. No. I mean, 1960 was great, but man, 79 I guess is the last one, but I prefer one in my lifetime, maybe, or even a winning season. It's been like 21 since we've had one of those. Yikes. Anyways.
Well, I was a Yankee fan when the Yankees. I actually became a Yankee fan because my grandfather, when I was growing up, we would spend a lot of Sundays at my grandfather's house, and every afternoon after dinner, we would come from an Italian-American family, and we would have dinner in the mid-afternoon, and we would go out right after dinner. Which would be at noon or 1 o'clock, we would go out in this very, very small backyard in Astoria, Queens, and listen to the Yankees. So, and the Yankees at that time were not that good. So I can sympathize, although, I can't quite feel your entire pain. I'm afraid.
That's okay. I don't expect you to. At least we got a nice new ballpark. That's no.
They have a beautiful ballpark, and they play some exciting baseball.
Yes. Have you been to the new Yankee Stadium?
Oh, absolutely.
And I was actually I went to a game at the old Yankee Stadium, and that was a tire fire. I was disappointed. I mean, once you got out to where your seat was, it was like, oh, okay, I get it. But getting to your seat was horrendous. There's nothing to do. I guess coming from the new ballpark that I came from, I guess is where I seen things from. So
that may be, but the problem for me is that having grown up in the area, and I remember the old stadium when I was a kid. We would in high school we would go to a lot of games, and sit up way up in left field, and literally the last row or second to last row, and just love it, and so when I was going to the old stadium, all of those memories, I guess, are there. So I loved the old stadium. The new stadium is a great place to watch baseball, and there's no doubt that I'm sure for most fans, and it's a better experience, but it doesn't have quite the same nostalgia that the old stadium did.
Well, you win a few World Series and you'll change your mind about that.
That's true. Well, they did. They won the first year the stadium opened. So I guess you can't complain.
And you said you know nothing about paranormal. We were talking about the ghost of Yankee Stadium, so there we go. For everybody that's mad at me for not doing it, there it is. I finally brought it out.
Well, I think maybe I'm not sure how you would interpret that. If they won, did they bring the ghosts over, or did they, had they excised the Red Sox? The Red Sox supposedly had put a curse on the new Yankee Stadium.
Well, apparently it didn't work, though.
But it must not have worked.
So there we are. Okay. One more sports question before everybody gets ticked off me. Is Jeter going to play again? Or have we seen the last of him?
I think Jeter will play again. The question obviously at this point will be how well he can play, because he's getting older. But I think you'll definitely see him in pinstripes on the baseball field again. So he's not going to go out, the way with an injury, I think.
I agree with you. But okay, back to, I guess my guest tonight is Jim DeFelice. I guess I should mention that. Best-selling author. Go to jimdefelice.com. I'll post that in the blog for everybody at post-show, so you can find that if you are so inclined to go buy one, or I would say several of his books, but he's probably got dozens out there. So, because I was looking on Amazon and I seen I can't even remember. I lost count. I'm sure you don't know either.
To be honest, off the top of my head, I don't. I'd have to look it up or ask someone. Well,
I was reading your frequently asked questions. That's what I'm going to steal one of my last questions for tonight, actually, about ebooks. It says you're not a big proponent of them, but it sounds like you are. Can you explain your stance to that to me a little bit? Because I personally love them, because with 2 young kids at home, at least I can close my book really quick and don't have to worry about it getting spilled on. So,
well, I think. First of all, I think I'm not sure that there'll be physical books, in 10 years. As far as the format goes, I just came back from California, and if I hadn't had 3 or 4 books on my Nexus, I don't know what I would have done, because the flights were delayed, and I couldn't have bought or literally carried that many paperbacks even. I think that ebooks are great for a lot of reasons. I think that the form, what we're going to see over the next, it's actually starting to happen now, are more enhanced, what they're calling enhanced ebooks, so that if I'm reading something, let's say I'm reading the American Sniper, and I want more information about a particular battle, that I could, or even Bradley, where I can just click kind of a hot button, or click some part of the text, or click maybe a picture, and suddenly get just much more information on that. We put out an enhanced edition, an enhanced ebook edition of American Sniper, with some videos of Chris talking and some other material. And I think over the next decade or so that we're going to see that form of book is really going to blossom, and is really going to become an art form in and of itself. So I think that ebooks are absolutely the future. I think there's also, having said that, though, there is also kind of a romance in a way in having a large hardcover book, and being able to refer to it when you're doing research or something. For some reason, I find it easier to flip back and forth through Post-it notes and marginalia than on a hardcover book than I do trying to do that with an e-reader. But I have to confess, I have a Kindle, I have a Nexus, and I have an iPad, and have books on all 3 of them. So I probably I don't know, romance and nostalgia are great, but practicality probably wins out.
So I thought you have a Nexus and a Kindle. Is there one you prefer over the other?
I think I'm not sure why I like the Nexus better, but probably because I have other stuff on the Nexus. From a writer's point of view, I don't think that there's any real difference. Amazon has more books available. And that's really the market. For instance, I've just over the last year, or a few months less than a year, we've been bringing out my Hogs series, which is eventually will be 6 books, which were set during the Gulf War and revolve around a squadron of A-10As. And it's kind of based loosely on some of the real things that happened during that war. And we've brought them out first on Kindle, and eventually we'll bring them out, for the other formats. But Kindle and Amazon are, that's the market where you have to be, because so many more people have Kindles. Having said that, though, I really do like the Nexus. Very, the Android. I like the Android operating system, and there's nothing you can say bad about the iPad, really. So.
Now, as an iPhone user, smaller scale, of course.
Right.
I use it every day. I have to charge it twice a day because I use it so much. So.
Twice a day.
Well, it's an older one, It's.
We may be calling, the iPhones are, anonymous or something on you to get you to untether yourself if you're double charging it. Oh my God, or at least get you a bigger battery.
Well, they said there's nothing wrong with the battery. That's the problem. But it's like I said, it's an older one.
No, I think it's you, Jim. I think you may be using.
Maybe I have a problem. I think it might be the Facebook notifications I get on it. That might be the problem. Ugh. Facebook's like crack. I don't know. Are you?
There you go.
Well, you're probably too busy writing to even bother with Facebook. I don't know, but no, it's all good. And like I said, I have all those things turned. Like for some reason, apparently need to get my email when they come, so I have that all set up to do that. And,
I have trained myself to not do that. So, which I have to admit is very hard. Very hard. And if you're trying to get work done and you have your Twitter feed on, you're really it's pretty much the end of the day.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's just amazing how fast that goes by, and you see something and you go, I want to comment, and then the page refreshes and you go, where in the world? What? And then something else pops up and you're off to the races again. So it's amazing what Twitter has done for us. I don't know. It's cool though. Some people hate it. I don't mind it. Sounds like you kind of enjoy it.
Twitter's fun, but as you say, it's very addictive. So you have to use it in very, very small bursts, and I've tried to limit myself actually. Although if I'm sitting at a Yankee game and I have the Twitter feed on, that's probably the end of me. So.
Yeah. Speaking of which, speaking of Facebook, I've seen a story on Facebook today where a reporter was at a Red Sox game taking self-picture of herself during batting practice, and there's a ball in the background about ready to hit her.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
There you go.
I'm like, I guess it's better than those people that take the picture of themselves in the bathroom mirror. But boy, at a baseball game, I've personally been hit by a couple baseballs. Not the best idea ever, but what do I know?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, I've mentioned JimDefelice.com. Is there anything else that we need to run out there before we run out of time?
No, you can run out anything you want. My most recent novel is called The Helios Conspiracy, and it's just out in paperback. So that's a little bit of a change of pace. We were talking about heavy matters, and Helios stars kind of a wayward FBI agent who always manages to solve his crimes or solve his cases, I should say, no matter what his bosses try to throw his way. That is a little bit more of a comic relief type book, and it was a little bit of an antidote after working on a lot of the kind of heavier things that I've been working on.
So you try to find, well, of course you have to find a little bit of comic relief. If not, you'd be, I don't want to say nuts because that isn't the word I want to use, but for the lack of a better word, I'd imagine you get so I don't want to say deep. Well, it gets so deep for a while, like we were talking about earlier, just talking about all those military things. You have to do something a little looser to keep yourself interested and keep yourself going.
Absolutely. I think if you take yourself too seriously, then you kind of going to become a very dull person. So if you can't laugh at yourself as well as the world, then you're in deep trouble.
Yes, you have to laugh at the world, especially as it comes. Just take it and laugh, or at least
roll your eyes.
Do something. Don't get bummed out about it, because it'll change. Oh, look, it'll change now. It's just. So the other thing. Okay, so we talked about that. So how many books do you have saved as documents on your computer right now that you're working on or thinking about?
That'd be hard to say. I have at any one given time, besides what I might be working on. I have books that are coming out that I've already written, and I'm also working on proposals for new projects and other things. I've just actually Chris, before he died, had been writing a book called American Gun. I've just finished. Unfortunately, when he died, he was not able to do the work on the book that he wanted to do, and so I kind of came in and did his did his job and did a lot of what he would have done. That book is coming out in right before Father's Day, and somewhere later on this year there'll be a new Rogue Warrior, which I write with Richard Marcinko, and then after that we have our latest installment of Dreamland, which should be out just in time for Christmas. So those are the projects that are that people will see over the next few months.
And the last question I want to ask you about is, how does it work with having a co-writer? Because I had a co-host at one point and I wanted to kill them.
Well, I can honestly say I've never wanted to kill any of my co-writers. It's all different. It depends on who you're working with, and the kind of book that you're doing. As a general rule, what I would do certainly with the novels is we'll talk about what the book's kind of the general direction of the book and outline it together, and then usually I'll actually do the physical writing myself, and then depending on whether I'm working with Larry Bond or Dick Marcinko or Dale Brown or whatever, there'll be a varying amount of feedback and kind of fine tuning and adding different things. So the process, which it's hard really to describe because it varies so much depending on who I'm working with.
Well, that's good to hear. At least that you can make it work with other people. Doesn't speak well for me.
Larry Bond once said that a good collaboration is where each person does 90% of the work. So I've always taken that to heart.
Well, Jim, I want to thank you for your time. It's been fun.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
We'll have to do it again sometime down the road when you get 10 more books out. I'm sure by the time we get back to it, it'll probably be then. So
that'd be fun. I'd welcome the chance.
All right. Have a good night. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody because it's time for me to go.
Thank you. Good night.
Well, before we flip that on-air sign to the off position, a quick reminder. For all things about the report, previews, and reviews, go to italkparanormal.com. That's italkparanormal.com. Good night.
This is Thomas Fusco, author of the book Behind the Cosmic Veil, A New Vision of Reality, and you are listening to the Malliard Report.
Hey everybody, it's the Malliard Report.
It's the Malliard Report.
Miss this week's Mutual UFO Network's UFO Conference at the Erie, PA Bayfront Convention Center. The conference